Throughout most of human history, people derived meaning and purpose in their lives through grand narratives. By that, I mean the narratives provided by religion and nationalism. In a religious framework, your life isn't a random series of accidents. Instead, you are a part of a cosmic script written by a higher power. Here, your suffering has a reason, and your moral choices have eternal consequences, and the end of your life is clearly defined, whether that is reaching heaven or achieving enlightenment. Later on, as societies became more secular, these religious grand narratives were replaced by political and national ideologies. People found a sense of grand narrative in the idea of human progress, the triumph of democracy, or the idea of building a great nation. So, in this scenario, you were just a worker. Instead, you were a citizen contributing towards the march of history, whether that was the dream of building a classless society, if you're living in a socialist or a communist nation, or maybe it's about the expansion of a global empire. These ideas gave individuals a sense of belonging to something much larger and more permanent than their own short lives. So let me give some examples, starting with the grand narratives of religion. So this will help solidify the idea of grand narratives. Daily work, for instance, in the religious framework, it is framed as part of a moral and spiritual obligation. Labor is not just for survival, but can be seen as fulfilling a role assigned by God, maintaining the order of creation, or cultivating virtues like discipline, humility, and service. So, even mundane tasks acquire a lot of weight because they are performed under a higher gaze and can contribute to one's spiritual standing. So, for example, a farmer living in the medieval times, for instance, does not simply farm to eat or sell crops. His work is understood as a part of God's order. Cultivating the land is fulfilling a role assigned within creation. If he works diligently and honestly, he is not just being efficient. Instead, he is practicing values like humility and obedience. So, if he cheats or neglects his duties, those are not just signs of bad work ethic, but more importantly, he is committing a sin, and he is disobeying God. Now, if you move to the nationalist grand narrative, here daily work is reframed as participation in a collective project, not just private survival. So, your labor, whether you are a teacher, an engineer, a soldier, or a factory worker, it is interpreted as contributing to the strength, stability, and future of the nation. The meaning of work shifts from just being me trying to earn money to make a living to instead of a bigger picture, like I help sustain and advance something larger than myself, my own short life. So the economic activity becomes symbolically tied to national progress. Productivity is a form of civic contribution towards the progress of a nation. So this reframing also moralizes work, diligence, discipline, and sacrifice. It's not just for your personal benefit. They become a patriotic duty towards the nation. To work hard is to support the nation. So, on the contrast, to be idle or to be unproductive can be framed as failing the collective nation. In times of crisis like wars, recessions, This becomes even more explicit when the ordinary labor is elevated into service. So eventually what happens is that the work that the individual does, it connects over time. What you build, produce or maintain is understood as part of an ongoing national story, something you inherited from the previous generation and you will pass to the next generation. This gives even routine tasks a sense of historical placement, which a purely economic view of work cannot provide. So these are the grand narratives. These are the religious and the national grand narratives that provided a sense of collective, objective, and purpose to people's lives for most of human history. But the people living in the postmodern world, so here we enter the postmodern world. So the individuals living in the modern contemporary world, who, which we also call as the postmodern world, have moved beyond this. They do not derive their meaning through grand narratives. The fundamental problem is that without these grand narratives, there is no longer a shared objective framework to make sense of the world. So this leaves the individuals in a state of existential lack of purpose. Therefore, even though the postmodern world has freed people from being forced to accept these grand narratives, it has also come at a deep cost of meaninglessness. So let's now understand the postmodern world and the postmodern subject. To make sure that we are on the same page, let's define these terms. The postmodern world is the modern world that we live in today, and the postmodern subject are the people that live in this modern world. That is, the people like you and me. This is characterized by deep skepticism toward any universal truth. So, in a postmodern world, we no longer believe that there is one single manual for how to live life or one single story that explains everyone's existence. Instead, what we have is a marketplace of ideas where everything is relative. So, the postmodern subject is the person living in this environment. And if you are a postmodern subject, you are free. You are free from being forced to accept those grand narratives. But that freedom is often overwhelming. Yes, it's true, you aren't told to be who to be by a priest or a king or by the government. Instead, you can be anything you want. However, without a grand story to guide you, that anything often feels like nothing. Because you are a subject who knows that the old stories, the old grand narratives, those are just stories. Yet, deep inside, you still feel the biological and the psychological need for the meaning they used to provide. So, this creates a constant internal tension. So, how do people living in this postmodern world deal with these scenarios? So, we look at the four scenarios here. Because there is no objective meaning to point to, the postmodern subject experiences specific psychological symptoms such as anxiety, depression, and frustration. Therefore, most people's actions, whether they are pursuing a career or seeking distraction, these are not driven by a clear positive goal, but are rather attempts to manage the frustrations of living in a world without a grander purpose. Drawing upon the works of Slavoj Žižek, Stephen West, who's the host of the Philosophy podcast, Philosophize This, describes four ways or four options in which people are attempting to fill this void. The people living in the contemporary world are attempting to fill this void. So let's start with the option 1, which is the choice to burn out. The first option, or the first response to a meaningless world, is to simply give up. When you realize that your career achievements might be forgotten in a few decades, and that there is no ultimate point to the grind, it is easy to fall into a state of burnout and hopelessness. Behind this door, people often choose to numb themselves through distractions. If life feels empty, the logical response for many is to quieten that feeling. This shows up in practical ways as constant reliance on anesthetizing activities, such as endless scrolling on social media, binge watching shows, playing hours and hours of video games, using substances and drugs and alcohol, and so on. So, these are attempts to put yourself to sleep so you do not have to face the silence of a world that does not provide you with any inherent purpose. So, this is the first choice, to burn out. The second choice is to become a willing participant in the global capitalist system. When there is no longer a grand narrative, people are no longer forced to accept a certain worldview. They are free to choose their own purpose and meaning. But this freedom comes at a very big price. As the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. It is very relevant here. With this freedom, now the responsibility completely falls on you, on the individual themselves, and it requires a lot of concentrated effort to create purpose for oneself. The global capitalist system, however, provides a shortcut. The global capitalist system provides a surface level alternative. They encourage optimizing yourself, your lifestyle, your social status as an alternative way of deriving purpose and meaning. In this framework, people strive to derive meaning by focusing on their careers in order to earn money and then use that money to try out different options that the capitalist system provides you. At the end of the day, the truth is it doesn't provide a lasting solution. That's because a new product, a new trend pops up every now and they are now vying for your attention. So the result is you jumping from one trend to another, one product to another, and trying to outdo and outcompete your neighbors and colleagues for the rest of your life without any permanent sense of purpose. So that's option 2 for you, participating in the global capitalist system. Option 3 is to artificially bring back the old traditions. So the third option is an attempt to go back in time, because some people find the weight of postmodern freedom too heavy to carry. They look at the grand narratives of the past, like the traditional religion or rigid cultural customs, and they try to artificially bring them back. So you might see people suddenly adopting very traditional lifestyles or joining groups with strict rules. This is happening across the world. In the Western world, you might have heard that there's a rise in Christianity among the younger populations. And in the United States, especially, there is a rise of embracing traditional gender roles. That is, where the woman is the housewife, the traditional wife, the caretaker, and the man is the provider. And even in India, you can see the newer generations embracing religion. So, what they are doing is that they are looking for the ability to stop questioning everything and simply be told what to do, what is right, what is wrong. So, it is an escape from the chaos of the modern world, the modern choice, back into the comfort of an old pre written script. But there is an important distinction here. For most people who have adopted that older religions or the older traditions, it is not because of a deep inherited faith in those religions, in those customs. Instead, it is a choice to adopt a belief system that provides a set of predefined directives that was taken away by the postmodern world. So, this is an easier option for people who do not want to go through the tough road of defining their own purpose. And finally, we come to the option 4, the path of deep engagement. So Stephen West says that the fourth option is the most practical alternative. So this option suggests that meaning is found in the process of doing a difficult task rather than the final result. West calls this failing at something you care about, but what it really means is choosing a pursuit, choosing an activity that is so deep that you can never finish or master it perfectly. So let me contrast this with option 2. In option 2, when you are a willing participant in the global capitalist system, you do things for a reward. You work hard at your job, or you work hard at your business for better paycheck or promotion or to grow your business. But in option 4, the work itself is the reward. It's not the outcome of the work, but the work itself is the reward. So this is based on the idea of surplus enjoyment. That is the satisfaction you get from the struggle of the activity itself. So let me give some examples, go through some examples that might help you understand this even better. One of such categories of activities could be learning a technical skill like coding or carpentry. So in this case, you do not do this because you need a website or a table. So you do not learn how to code because you want to build a website, or you want to get a job. If you want a website, there are many services these days that they can directly give you a website, even without having to build it. So similarly, you don't want to learn carpentry because you want a table or a chair. If you want it, you can go buy a chair. It's always available there. Instead, you learn those technical skills for the satisfaction. In case of coding, the satisfaction of solving a logical error or a logical problem. In case of carpentry, you learn carpentry to appreciate the skills and the effort required to build a good chair or good furniture. So in this process, you will fail many times, but the act of trying to get better provides a deep sense of presence that scrolling through social media cannot provide. The another category of such activities is physical mastery. Mastery over your body. It could be activities like long distance running, like marathons, or weightlifting, those kind of things. So there's no end to fitness. You can always beat your previous marathon record. You can always lift heavier than your previous record. So you show up every day and you push yourself to your personal limits. And even when you fail to hit a new record, the discipline of the attempt gives your day a structure and purpose that is entirely yours, and you get a deep sense of satisfaction out of that. And the final category that I can talk about is pursuing certain creative activities like writing, painting, music, and so on. So, a writer may never write the perfect book, they might never write it. So, they might finish a draft and immediately see 100 ways to improve it. I myself have experienced it quite a lot of times. As someone who has written a lot of articles and a lot of scripts for videos, I have seen that once I have completed it, I can always see ways of improving it and changing it. So I know that I will never be able to write that perfect article or that perfect script for the video. So, in this sense, we all fail to reach that perfection. But the deep engagement required to think, to organize thoughts, and to create something new is where the actual meaning lives. So, that's how you get that satisfaction. So, the key to option 4 is that it must be something with an infinite ceiling. That is, you can always be a better runner, a better weightlifter, a better programmer, a better writer, or even a better parent. Because you can never complete these tasks, you are forced to engage with the world, with the task at a deeper level than someone who is just consuming products or seeking status. So, in option 4, the meaning is derived from such deep engagement with an activity. So, this is where we come to the end of this talk. So, we live in a world that has moved beyond the grand narratives, and we cannot easily go back to a time where everyone agreed on the same meaning of existence. So we are left with the four choices. We can numb ourselves down, we can chase status and fame in the capitalist system, or we can pretend the past never changed and try to bring back the old traditions. Or option 4, finally we can find something to love and to struggle with. The fourth option suggests that meaning isn't something you find once and for all. It is something you create through through the discipline of showing up, engaging deeply, and continuing trying to fail and continuing, and even when you fail, you continue to try even when you fall short and keep doing it over and over again. And that's how you find the connection and the purpose within that work.